All right. So we're doing this Siman Samech Gimel, which is about, well, it's not two, really just two sifim, and they're two different topics, really. One is be a first-time marital relations on Shabbat, whether that's permitted or not. Oh, all right. Something was going on there. And the second topic is unusual bracha that we say on first-time marital relations, which is we'll talk about that also. So the sugya in the Gemara is this very long sugya. I didn't assign it to you. I don't know if we've seen it already in other shiurim, but it's from Daf Hey until Daf Zayin Amud Bet in Ketubot, and it's basically going on this whole topic of whether you can have a bia rishona of a woman can lose her virginity on Shabbat if that's a malacha, if that's forbidden. So I just tried to give you the minimum sources to get sort of the conclusions or the questions and then the conclusions. So let's look at the sheet that I sent out. Here, maybe here it is. I changed it a little bit. Just a second. I'll share my screen. No. Share screen. Share. Okay. So here we are in Ketubot Daf Hey Amud Bet, and they asked this question. Maybe Aaron, you want to read this beginning of this Gemara? This is actually new. If you got if you only looked at the first source sheet that I sent out, then you didn't see this. I added this one.
Yep. Ibailahum. Ma'uliv ol bitchila b'Shabbat. Da mifkad pakid o chabure michbar. They asked them, what is the halacha regarding lechatchila having sex for the first time on Shabbat? Do we understand the situation of a woman's virginity or a woman's hymen as being mifkad pakid, sort of like I think Rashi explains it like a flap, or chabure michbar, something that is actually physically attached and would be breached. V'im tim say lomar.
Wait, so this is a very important point, what you said about Rashi. Mifkad pakid means that Rashi says it's like kind of like in a pocket. It's like the blood is inside the flesh, but it's just sitting there kind of. It's actually similar to what it talks about in Shabbat about like certain fruits.
No, with mifkad pakid, it's dafka not inside the flesh, right? That with chibur mechber, it's inside of the flesh. With the mifkad pakid, it's like gathered, as in it's inside the body, but not inside the flesh. As the mifkad pakid is this idea that the blood is gathered outside of the flesh, inside of the body, and is just essentially waiting to be released.
Well, the question is if it's attached to the body or not. If the blood is attached to the body, or if it's its own separate pocket.
It's like
a pocket in the flesh.
Like kanus. He says it's
like kanus in. Yeah. You can maybe the words I'm using are not the best words. What I mean is, it's in a pocket, and the pocket is of course made out of flesh. It's not made out of plastic. Blood is not just sitting there floating in air.
Correct. The blood is encased, like the blood is behind some kind of barrier, but the blood is not within the flesh itself. The blood is like collected beyond that barrier.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what I meant. It's in the flesh, but it's in a pocket in the flesh, as opposed to it being a normal piece of the flesh, which just has blood inside of it, spread out. And that would be chabure michbar. As mifkad pakid means it's actually there's a halacha on Shabbat that you're allowed to I guess like you're allowed to, let's say, release a pimple on Shabbat because it's not the liquid there is like in a pocket. in the skin. You're not pushing it out of the skin. It's in a pocket. But you can't poke yourself with a needle and make blood come out, because then it's coming out of the skin itself, of the flesh itself. So that's the difference. Is mifkad pakid, is the blood like sort of wrapped in a wrapper and you're just releasing it? Or is it, that's the way I understood it, or is it mixed into the flesh? Is that unanimous? Yeah, okay. So what's the difference? Because if it's, so it would be permitted if it's mifkad pakid, because you're not doing it, it's not called a chabura. It's not called doing a wound on Shabbat. A wound on Shabbat is forbidden. All right, so go on.
ואם תמצא לומר דם מפקד פקיד לדם הוא צריך בשערי, או דילמה לפתח הוא צריך ועשר. So even if it's mifkad pakid, is the thing that the man needs to do is to release the blood, in which case that would be allowed, or is it perhaps that he needs to make an opening in the hymen, in which case,
right? So what's the problem of opening? What's the problem of making an opening? What malacha?
On Shabbat.
What malacha is that?
Stira.
Bona.
Bona. Very good. Right. It's bona, like binyan. Your bona. Yes. You're building. You're creating something. Okay. So if he's desiring of the petach, then he's like building the petach, and then it would be aser.
ואם תמצא לומר לדם הוא צריך ופתח ממילא כעתה, הלכה כרבי שמעון דאמר דבר שאין מתכוון מותר, או הלכה כרבי יהודה דאמר דבר שאין מתכוון אסור. So, and even if it's the case that he's actually trying to get the blood, and the petach is sort of a necessary side result of that process, does the halacha go according to Rabbi Shimon, who says if you don't intend something as your main thing, then the action that would cause that thing to happen is mutar, or do we go with Rabbi Yehuda, who says even if you don't intend it, it's asur?
Right. The famous machloket in Shabbat about davar she'eino mitkaven. The Rabbi Shimon holds it's mutar, but the halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon. It's like Rabbi Yehuda in that regard. So even if you're trying to make a petach, even if you're just interested in the blood and the petach comes by itself, it would still be asur according to Rabbi Yehuda. But now I think we're about to say that Rabbi Shimon is going to also have a problem. Go on.
So if you say the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, i.e. that if he's intending to do something, then that even if he's not intending to do something, if he knows it's going to happen, it's asur. Is the thing he's not intending to do, but he knows it's going to happen, is it kilkul or tikkun?
Right. In other words, even if we hold like halachas like Rabbi Yehuda, not like Rabbi Shimon, so it'd be asur because it's coming. But maybe you are only doing a kilkul, and a kilkul is maybe permitted actually. Oh, is it mitaken? Maybe you're fixing it. So we're going to see in the Bach how he understands that.
Wait, Rav Nachum, if it's mitaken, couldn't that also be compared to a brit milah? It's also drawing blood to do what's sort of a
brit
tikkun,
milah
which we do on Shabbat.
There's a special drasha why brit milah is permitted on Shabbat because it says
Brit milah is an exception, but also for kilkul, usually it's not like mutar. Usually kilkul just brings it from like chayav to patur of alasur, and then we have to have the additional factor of like mitzvahs or like
right. Well, that's what, right, exactly. Like yes, that's what the Bach is going to say, but I think the Gemara is assuming that. But you're right. According to you're right, mikalkel is not normally enough, but it would at least bring it down to the level of Rabbanan, and then because it's a mitzvah, maybe we permit it. Or perhaps he's mitaken, because, in other words, the question is, maybe you prefer a woman, maybe the man prefers the woman to without her hymen, because that with her the hymen cut, so that he's now easier for him to have relations with her in the future. So maybe it's a tikkun, or maybe it's a kilkul because he broke something, or he made her. Well, there's different explanations of what that could mean. This kilkul, but it could mean that he made her, maybe she was, if she, a woman who is a virgin gets 200 zuz, and so she's now no longer, so she's worth 100 zuz, so maybe that's the kilkul. It's not clear exactly what the kilkul is. But is he doing something to damage her or to improve her? That's the question. So anyway, we left this all as kind of questions. Let's read the next piece. You can read the next piece.
Am I still reading?
Yeah, go ahead.
Tanya, hakones teptula lo yiv'ol b'tchila b'Shabbat v'chachamim matirin. It's taught in the Breita, one who marries a virgin should not have sex with her for the first time on Shabbat.
Right. Should not. All right, go on.
Chachamim matirin, and the Chachamim permitted. Man Chachamim, which Chachamim are they? Amar Rabba, Rabbi Shimon he. The Amar, Devar she'ein mitkaven mutar. Rabba said it's Rabbi Shimon, since he said a person who does not intend to do something as a sort of a side product, it is mutar to do the thing that causes that thing to happen.
Right. So, which we don't, in other words, and therefore, so sounds like this Mekel opinion would be like Rabbi Shimon, which is this machloket in the Gemara with we paskin like Rabbi Shimon, but it sounds like it's Rabbi Shimon. So go on.
Amar le Abaye, v'hamode Rabbi Shimon b'psik reshe v'lo yamut. Abaye said to Rabbi Shimon agrees that if you cut someone's head off, they're going to die. I.e., that if you definitely know something is going to happen as a result of an action you do, you can't really say you didn't intend it.
And therefore what? And therefore in this case,
therefore Rabbi Shimon actually would think that it's
why? What's this case? Let's bring it back to our case.
Because this is he would say this is actually it's not really a case of davar she'ein mitkavein. It actually is a case of davar that you're sort of mitkavein, or you're not ein mitkavein.
Right. But what is the act that you're doing?
The act would be releasing the blood, and as a result, you know that you're going to be doing something to the hymen.
Well, no. The act is you're trying to make a petach, and the blood, the wound comes of its own, but it's for sure going to happen. The wound is for sure going to happen. No?
Right. I thought it was that they think, right, you're trying to release the blood that is pooled in the pocket, and they sort of, the petach is something that's sort of happening.
No, I think, well, based on my reading of the Bach, I mean, maybe I'm reading it according to the way the Bach taught me to read it, but the way I'm understanding it is that well, fine, I don't want to say too much because we'll see it in the Bach. But you're saying according to this opinion that it's mifkad pakid, then we still would have a problem. You're saying because
right, I mean, that's it seems like in Ketubot, but the world we're in, even in the mifkad pakid one is it's mifkad pakid and the petach is mamela. How mamela is the petach.
And so mifkad, and so what's the psik resha? You're trying to release, releasing the blood is no problem, or it is a problem?
It seems like that's not a problem.
That's not a problem. So what is the psik resha? What is the thing that is a problem?
The petach is the problem.
You're saying it's bone. It's like bone.
Yeah.
Even though we said before that maybe it's a kilkul, but maybe it's not. Okay, I hear you. In other words, we don't know if it's a kilkul or not. And so maybe Rabbi Shimon would hold that it's not a kilkul and it's a biniya. And so even though you're not trying to build it, but it's for sure going to happen, it's a secretion. So even though, so it should be awesome. Okay. So go on. Amar le.
Lo kahalal bavlim she'im biki'im behetia or hataya. Hataya. Ella yesh biki'im behataya. Okay. Rabba said to Abaye, we are not talking about the Babylonians who do not know how to have this quasi sex or tilted sex, such that
Yeah, Rashi. I brought you Rashi here. Bahataya.
shematin tzadin ve'ein motziim dam. So so that they
They have
tilt
intercourse on the side. They sort of angle themselves so that they don't tear the hymen. They just they go in without tearing the hymen. These are these expert people who have expert sex participants, whatever you want to say. I don't know. People who know how to have relations. I think it's normal relations. It's not. But it's just on an angle. It's stadin. He goes into on the side. And so what did we say? So we say we're not talking about people that are not bakim, but we're talking about people that are bakim, that are experts, b'hataya. And therefore it's not a psikresha. They know how to do this without letting blood out. And so if blood happens, it's not a psikresha. It's not necessarily going to happen. It just happens sometimes. It's not supposed to happen. But according to this opinion, according to this point in the Gemara, it would mean that you could only have relations if you're an expert in hataya. And then it would be forbidden to other people who are not experts.
do I continue?
Yeah.
Imkain Torah Lama. Well, if everybody's an expert, why is, I think here being Tarud is referring to Kriyat Shema, of not having to say Kriyat Shema. If you're an expert, you're probably not Tarud. The answer is L'sheino Baki. That halacha is for someone who's not Baki. Okay,
Right.
so Yomru Baki Mutar, Sheino Baki Asur. In that case, we should be saying only people who are Baki can have sex on Shabbat, or legal Batchila b'Shabbat, and if you're not Baki, you can't. The answer is Rov Baki Inhan. Most people are Baki.
Right. So we halacha is paskin according to the Rov. The Rov is Baki'in. So at this point, it sounds like the Gemara is saying that you're allowed to have sex as long as you have a reasonable supposition that there won't be any blood. In other words, you can assume that probably there won't be blood. If it happens occasionally, that once you have the reasonable assumption, then it's not called a psikresha, and then Rabbi Shimon would permit it because it's the Varsha Enu Mikavid. But if you'd hold like Rabbi Yehuda, then it would be Aser anyway, right? Because he holds the Varsha Enu Mikavid is also Aser. But according to Rabbi Shimon, it would be permitted. That's where the Gemara is holding today, I believe, at this moment. Now,
Wait, I thought the machloket between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda was within the context of the psikresha. So we've taken it out of the psikresha, but maybe I don't.
no, well, the Gemara, no. Rabbi Shimon holds the Varsha Enu Mikaven is mutter, period. But he's molded to Rabbi Yehuda that the Varsha Enu Mikaven is aser in a psikresha. But Rabbi Yehuda holds that the Varsha Enu Mikaven is always aser. Because you don't mikaven, but you did it. You're doing that thing. Okay, so here, maybe Sarah, you want to read the last piece of the Gemara here? Again, I jumped ahead, notice. Well, not so far ahead, but about an amud ahead. It's Kaf Zion, Ketubot Zion Amud Aleph.
I would love for someone else to read for the very stupid reason that I broke my glasses over Pesach, and these are like 3 years old, so I'm like a little unreliable.
Okay, I'm with you. I also forget, I have reading glasses and I forget to put them on, so it's hard for me to see also. Okay, so maybe Asher, you want to read? Right here, this
Okay,
little is.
yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Rav Papa, hold on. Rav Papa Mishmei de Rabba Amar.
Wait, am I in the wrong place? Oh, wait a second. I'm in the wrong place. Yeah, Amar Rav Papa, yeah.
Okay.
Amar Rav
Rav Papa-
Papi. By the way, in this Gemara.
I'm reading the wrong one. I have Rav Papa Mishmei.
No. So
Sorry,
in this Gemara, actually, there's a conversation between Rav Papi and Rav Papa.
okay. Hold on. Is that in the same
Not the
that
same
same paragraph? I'm in Sfaria looking at this. Okay. Amar Rav Papi. Amar Rav Papi Rav Papa.
No, not there. No, Amar Rav Papi Mish. Oh, am I? Maybe my too.
Rav Papa Mishmei de Rabba Amar B'Yom Tov Shari.
Okay,
that
maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I copied it wrong.
No, it's Rav Papi.
It's Rav Papi? Thank you.
Okay.
Just read
Hold
from
on.
my thing.
Okay. Amar Rav Papi Mishmei de Rabba Lo Tema B'Yom Tov de Shari. Hai B'Shabbat Asur. Davi Adin Afilu B'Shabbat Nami Shari. So Rav Papi said in the name of Rabba, it's no wonder that it's allowed on Yom Tov.
No, no wonder.
No, lo tema. It's not.
Don't say.
Don't say. Okay. I was thinking. Okay, don't say that it's mutar on Yom Tov because it's asur on Shabbat. No. So you can't say that it's that. You can't say that. Hold on, I'm getting myself turned around here. There you go. Okay, no, you can't say that it's allowed on Yom Tov but not on Shabbat because also on Shabbat it's allowed.
Exactly. That it's allowed on Shabbat
It's
and
allowed
Yom
on
Tov.
Shabbat, right? So
In
you can't
other
just say it's. You can't say it's one and not the other.
So Rav Papi is in the name of Rava is saying that it's allowed on Shabbos and it's allowed on Yom Tov. There's a whole sugya there. I don't want to go into it all. Then I skipped a little bit here. Rav Nachum bar Yitzchak.
There you go. From Matnignin, Achiyamar Rababau.
No, from Rav Nachum bar Yitzchak Matni Hachi.
Wait, that's why am I not seeing that on the same page?
It's in the chat as well.
Okay, so let me open up the chat.
Wait, you don't see my screen? I'm not sharing my screen.
No, I just opened what you sent on my own screen. I was looking at the source sheet that you sent.
The second source sheet. You have to.
Yeah, that's the second one. The second one, the one that you resent today.
So it's number 3 there.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking at.
And it says the second line is Rav Nachum.
Second one, then maybe I opened the first one by accident. Okay, so you know what?
Doesn't matter. You can skip. You can read where you have matni. It's not matnitin, it's matni.
Okay. Mani Achi Amar Rababau, Shar Rav Yishmael ben Yaakov, the Mansur et Rabbi Yochanan b'Tzaidan, ve'ana shini ma'u liv'ol b'tula b'Shabbat, ve'am alei asur, v'yechat hamuta liv'ol b'tula b'Shabbat, b'tchala b'Shabbat. So we taught that even Rababau asked Rav Yishmael ben Yaakov, the Mansur. What's the Mansur at Rabbi Yochanan?
The Minsur, it's where he's from. He's
okay.
from the town of Tsur.
Okay. So he's from Tsur. That he has Rabbi Yochanan.
They asked Rabbi Yochanan.
Right.
And where were they? Sidon. They were in Sidon. They were in Lebanon.
Okay.
Va'ana Shami, and I heard it.
Okay.
And the question was the following. Mahu livol b'tchila b'Shabbat. What is the din about first time virginal sex on Shabbat? Amar le asur. And Rav Yochanan said it's forbidden.
But we know the
halacha is mutter.
Right.
And then we have this statement that sort of, I don't even know who is saying it's a later statement in the Talmud. The hilchata mutter livol b'tchila b'Shabbat. We just have sort of an amorphous statement here that is permitted, and we don't know exactly why. And that is going to be, crucial why it's permitted. Why is this permitted? What is the reasoning? Because if it's related to being baki'in, bahataya, then it may not any longer be permitted today. But if the reason that they said hilchata mutter is for some other reason, then it could still be shayach. It should still be relevant to us today. So that's this bach here. So maybe Lexi, you want to read a little bit of this bach?
Sure.
But don't read it too fast because I'm an old man.
Will do. Okay. So mutar livol lechatchila b'tula b'Shabbat v'chulei. Hachi yasikna perakama diktubot v'hilchata mutar livol b'tchila b'Shabbat כלומר, לא מבעיה עם בעל קודם שבת, מכיוון דנותנים לו 4 לילות, מותר לחזור ליבו בשבת, אף על גב דאיכא לחוש דיומא מכבל פורתא, מספיקה לא אסרינן כדשמואל, דאמר שמואל פירצה דחוקה, מותר להיכנס בה בשבת, ואף על פי דמשאיר צרורות, אינו ודאי דמשאיר צרורות, אלא אפילו בתחילה דאיכא למימר דמחבל, בנמי מותר, ואין בו לא משום חובל. Okay, so we see the conclusion in Perek Kama Diktubot is that it is permitted to have sex with a virgin for the first time on Shabbat. And he's saying that, like, Shita, that if you've already had sex with her before this, like, you know, that you're allowed to have sex with her on Shabbos, even though it's possible that you will cause some further stretching, tearing, bleeding, whatever, because
What is this? What? Wait, let's just stop on this one thing. He says it's pshita, like you said, lomi boy, that if he had relations before, let's say on a Wednesday, then he could have relations on a Shabbos. Why? How does he know that that's obvious? The notnim lo dalit arba leilot. What is that referring to?
I mean, that has to do with the number. It doesn't have to do with the number of days you're allowed to have sex with your like virgin wife and assume that the potential blood coming is not from Nida.
Exactly. Yes, it's a Mishnah in Nida. It's a Mishnah in Nida that's a machlokas between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. But it says there that the first 4 nights you can have relations, and any blood that you see, you can assume is from the wound of her being a virgin, and not dam nida, but only for 4 days. But he's saying, if you normally marry a woman on a Wednesday or a Thursday night, let's say, or whatever, Thursday really. So Thursday night, so you have Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, or Thursday night. You know, you're having relations on Shabbat if you have 4 nights. So that is like second time relations is for sure permitted, and we know that from this Mishnah because the Mishnah says you have 4 nights, and we know also that you get married, you know, before Shabbat. So on a Wednesday, so one of those nights will be Shabbat. So for sure you're having relations on Shabbat if it's a second time.
Right. So he says that, like, first of all, it's like pashut from the context of the giving 4 nights that there are cases where you can have sex with your previously virgin wife who you've had sex with once or twice now on Shabbos, both in that context, and he gives the explanation for it, right? That, like, for that, we could say it's like this thing that Shmuel said, where like a small, like, little, how do you define that? A small little breached area, like, you know, entrance, whatever.
Like a wall. Like, let's say a wall. Yeah. This is another Gemara.
Yeah, if a wall had a little breach in it, you can walk through it, even if it's pretty narrow.
Right, even though you might knock off some more stones and they might fall on the ground.
Right, and that's because it's not like completely vadai, you're allowed to do it. And so too, they're assuming that, like, once you've had sex for the first time, there's enough of like an opening that it's not like vadai in the same way that it'll cause her to bleed.
So wait, so let's go slower. Wait, I just want to go a little slower. Shmuel holds that pirza dechuka mutar. If there's a pirza and you can only get through it, but dachak, and you're probably going to knock over some rocks, then you could still go through. And so he's basically using that as a proof for the Mishnah, you know, as a proof for the idea that if it's a second time having relations, then for sure you could do it because maybe there won't be any blood, even though it's likely there'll be blood, but maybe there won't be. So that you could do from this idea of being able to go through the wall.
Right. So he's giving like, you know, an explanation behind the fact that, like, we don't need to even ask this question vis-a-vis having sex for the second or third or fourth time. But he says it's coming to teach that even the first time, we don't consider it to be wounding her.
Right. He's basically explaining the word tefillah. That's what he's coming to do. That when it says tefillah, it means specifically the first time because the other ones are also for sure permitted, the second time. The ein ba mishum, and then he writes these words. Why is it mutter? The ein bo lo mishum chovel. Notice he doesn't say He doesn't say it's not binyan. He says it's not chovel.
Well, he gets into the binyan stuff.
Yes.
But yeah.
So read the next piece.
So near the sphere,
Sorry.
Nirat the Sfrele Rabbeinu, the Had the Shakel Vatari Talmuda Miikra, the Kaamar, the Ikal Memar, the Asor Livo Betchila Beshabat, Afilu Im Tim Selomar, Dam Mifkad Pakid, Makomakon, Metakanhu Etela Petach, Inami, Asor Mishum de Chabori Mechaber, Vafagav, Delami Kaven Lechabura, Liv Ol Bila Gmura, Ela Yivo Bahataya, Nami Asor, Mishum Davarsh and Mitkaven, Asor Krabi Yehuda. ואפילו רבי שמעון נמי אסור אם אינו בקיא בהטיה, בפסיק רישא הוא, ואפילו אם תצא לומר מקלקל בחבורה הוא, אפילו הכי אסור לבעול בעילה גמורה, זה הלכה כרבי שמעון זה מקלקל בחבורה חייב. So he is first setting out the fact that in our Gemara, it does give various reasons why it would seem that this would be forbidden. It gives us a lot of potential reasons that this could be forbidden, right? It says that like, even if you say that it's not a case of chavala or chabura, even if you say it's the idea of like the blood is, collected behind this flap, as it were, you're still creating this petach, or maybe you are injuring them and then it's injury. And even if you didn't intend to do it, if you don't know how to do hataya, then it would be a psik reisha. And
wait,
so
let me go a little bit slow, a little bit more slowly. The first point he says is that mifkad pakid could be a problem if you are mitaken.
Right, the mitaken who etzel petach. He's going through all the different kind of like there are all these different like flows of love.
But then there's this inami. There's a dichotomy going on here. There's two There's two different alternatives. One is that it's mifkad pakid, and then the problem is a particular problem, mitaken. But if it's chabure mechabre, then we have the whole rest of the Gemara.
Right. Well, no, I mean, we also, whatever.
Or the next pieces that he says.
But the next pieces are about this, right? So like either it's collected and then we still have to worry about the petach, or it's not collected and you're creating an injury. And even if you're not intending to create an injury, if you're somebody who doesn't know how to have sex in a way that isn't guaranteed to give blood, then it's a psik reisha. And like, well, first of all, he says, right, like for Rabbi Yehuda, the whole idea would be that even if it's not a psik reisha, if it's a davar sheni meets kaven, but it happens, it would still be aser, right? That for Rabbi Shimon, if it's not a psik reisha, then it's permitted because davar sheni meets kaven mutar as long as it's not definite. For Rabbi Yehuda, even if it's not definite, and you didn't intend it, it's still like aser. And we say,
but all of those opinions are that it's chabura, right?
Right. These are all within the context of it being chabura. And again, for Rabbi Shimon, we say if you're not a baki b'hataya, if you're not expert in this particular way of having sex such that you won't cause bleeding, then it's psik reisha. And so even for him, it would be aser. And you could say, well, a chabura is makalkel, so maybe that would be at least, take it a step down. But we have this, we hold like Rabbi Shimon, who on the one hand, even though he's usually more mekel than Rabbi Yehuda in most positions, vis-a-vis Mekalkel, Rabbi Yehuda thinks Mekalkel is pater b'chol melachot, and Rabbi Shimon thinks that with Chabura and Havara, Mekalkel is chayav. And so if we hold like Rabbi Shimon like
Rabbi Shimon has a special din that Mekalkel by a Chabura is chayav. So then, if this is a chabura, if you're doing a wound, then you'd be chayiv even according to Rabbi Shimon, and so we have a problem. But that is not the maskana. And maybe Alan, maybe you want to read C here. That is not the maskana of the Gemara. So here this is gonna be the important part here now, or the beginning of the important part.
Mikol Matan. Miskana kaimalan dam mifkad pakid, makalkal etza petzach.
Oh, so right there he avoids all of those issues of whether we hold like Rabbi Shimon or Rabbi Yehuda, because it's actually mifkad pakid, and there's no chabura here at all. It's just the possibility of a tikkun of the woman, and on that we say umikalkelu. We also say it's mikalkel. In other words, I just want to point. Well, maybe we're going to see this more, but basically, we have this statement in the Talmud that says the hilchata, that it's mutter, and the hilchata that it's mutter, and we don't know why they're saying it. So the Bach is telling us why they're saying it. That the maskana is, even though it's not clear from the Gemara that's the maskana, but he's saying the maskana is that it's dam mifkad paki, umekakilu etzel petach, and it's not a wound. And if you're worried about making a tikkun, and you're making a kilkun. But go ahead.
ואף לרבי שמעון, אין לך מקלקל חיה ולחוב ולמעביר. אבל בשאר מלאכת מה דרבי שמעון דפטר אבל אסר. Okay. Right.
So even though, like Lexi just said, the Rabbi Shimon holds that mikalkel is chayav by chovel and by making a wound and by fire, but by shar avot malacha, but in the other malacha, which this would potentially be, he's moder Rabbi Shimon de patur. Aval asur. And here, even though it's asur d'Rabbanan, they didn't oser it in a place of a mitzvah. So the rabbis permitted it here because it's a mitzvah.
ולכן כתבו כל הפוסקים בסתם דמותר לבעול בתחילה בשבת. דמשמע אפילו בעילה גמורה בלא הטיה נמי שרי למסכנה.
Right. So there's this whole din of hataya is not necessary. We don't need to have hataya because we're holding that there's no wound happening here at all. There is no wound. It is just a releasing of blood that was soaked up, that was sitting there. And therefore that whole part of the Gemara that was like talking for a long time about what kind of chabura it is and how we hold and mitkaven, that's all according to the other side of the coin, that the dam, that it's not bifkat paki, that it's a chibur mikbar, or mikbar chabura, that it's a wound. All right, let's go to Dalet, the D.
Okay. והלכה אמר תלמוד רבי שמעון הוא דמתיר לבוא משום דלאו פסיק רשע הוא דבוודאי כאבית חברה קהל הבבלים שאין בקיאים בהטיה אלא רוב בקיאים בהטיה עלמא דאסר לבוא בעילה גמורה אלא צריך לבוא בהטיה.
So that seems to imply that whole Gemara that whole part where it's talking about the Bavlim seems to imply you have to do with Hataya. V'kamosha katuva Tosfot. And that's what the Tosfot said. You have to do with Hataya.
Right. בדיבור מלכה לא כל הבבלים ובדיבור מלכה אלא מעטה של שלוש בינים. כל זה אינו אלא למד ההווה ספירה מעיקר דם חבורי מחבר.
Right. So exactly. So here's this great thing. The Tosfos, we didn't see the Tosfos, but the Tosfos comes along and says that you have to do Hataya. That's the only way it's permitted if you do Hataya. But what he's saying is this is just Tosfos, not paskening, but just explaining the Gemara at the current moment in the Gemara. At that current moment in the Gemara, the statement of the Gemara was you have to do Hataya. So he's explaining that. But he's not actually paskening because that's not the Maskana. He's just explaining what was Sphirale at that point. And there's all according to the opinion that it's Chabura Michbar.
Right. אבל המסכנה משמע דהלכה במותר לבוא בעילה גמורה. לכתחילה. דבסתמה פסק הלכתה מותר לבוא אפילו לבבלים דלא בקיאים בהטיה.
Right. It never said, just said hilchata it's mutter. It didn't say hilchata mutter for bavlim.
וצריך לומר דקיימלן כהחלישנה דדם מפקיד פקיד ואין שם איסור אלא דעשה פתח.
Right. So we must, right. The Gemara must be holding that it's dam mifkad pakid, and there's no isser except for making a spout, whatever, making an opening. So this is what we were saying before. We were wondering what exact malacha that is. It's binyan. By the way, this is one of the most difficult halachas on Shabbos, which is making a petach on Shabbos. Like when you open a carton of milk, can you make a petach in it?
I mean,
It's
the
a-
interesting thing is that, like, in anatomically speaking, it would technically be mosif ala petach, because technically, there's already a hole from which like blood and discharge comes out, and that it's actually just expanding the hole. But obviously, they don't seem to be like operating off of that knowledge, but it's actually just stretching out an existing hole as opposed to creating a new one.
You're right. Unless we're not talking about the hole in the vagina or an entrance to the vagina, but we might be talking about, like I was saying before, that the blood is like, imagine it's in like a zippered pouch, and we're unzippering the pouch and letting the blood out. So we're making a petach in the pouch where the blood was being held. I mean, I don't know how carefully the rabbis examined women's hymens, but maybe not very carefully. Yeah, Aaron.
I mean, I don't know that we'll be able to answer this question. Yeah, but I guess, right, to what degree do they just not understand the anatomy of a vagina, or is it that they're trying to like imagine an anatomy that would fit into halachic categories? So they're like, we know biologically what's going on, but we're gonna sort of make up what we think is going on, or do they just like not have it clear?
I mean, obviously, I cannot answer that question because I don't know what they're thinking. But my guess, but my working, I said my working theory, is that the term? My working hypothesis is that they don't know what they're talking about. that they never like did a scientific experiment on a woman. They know that no woman would volunteer for such an experiment to like see how it looks before, how it looks after, where watch it as the blood is coming out. I don't think it's my sixth sense tells me that they never really saw the event as it's happening inside of a woman at that moment. So they really can't know. And that's why there's a machloket. They don't know if it's chabura or if it's mifkad paki. And in fact, the Bach is saying that it's mifkad paki. I think you and I would probably say it's really a chabura. And but the maskana of the Gemara is that it's mifkad paki, which is a hard thing to understand.
Rav Nachum, we have several examples, though, throughout halacha, especially throughout the Gemara, of, I guess, the rabbis, for lack of a better term, representing the medical knowledge or understanding of the day that now we know just isn't accurate.
Isn't that
right? No, but I'm saying but I'm saying there are a lot of examples like that, and so the question is, how often do we say, well, this is what the Gemara says, and this is what the Rishonim and the Achronim and the Shulchan Aruch said, be'ikvot zeh, and how much do we say, well, now we know that that's just not the case, and so we disregard, and where do we give ourselves that reshut? Or do we give ourselves that reshut?
Here it ends up with the same sack, though, right? Like here, because they end up saying that's mutter because of XYZ reasons, the knowledge that you're in fact not creating some new hole, slash also the knowledge that you don't.
It could be worse. No, I would say that modern science would disagree with the Talmud and say, no, you are ripping skin and blood is coming, skin, you're ripping a membrane and blood is coming out of that. And that's a chabura.
Well, no, but modern science would also tell you that it is so far from psik reisha that there has to be any blood whatsoever, even when somebody has never had sex before, that like it in fact has much more to do with lubrication than it has to do with whether they've had sex. And so that would contribute to this being definitely not psik reisha. And so if we hold like Siman, the Parsha meets Kaven is mutar, then it would be mutar.
As you're saying, if we would write our own Gemara today, we would say something like maybe it's a chabura, but it's not a psik reisha, and therefore Rabbi Shimon, and therefore even maybe according to maybe it's like the second time where it's not necessarily going to happen at all, and you're not mitkaven for it, so it'll be mutter for those reasons. But that's not what the Gemara is saying. But that would be a logical mahalach. That would be a logical mahalach to say it's again, it's a chabura, but it's not necessarily going to happen. It may be likely, but not necessarily, and maybe you're not with kaven for that. Sarah, you want to just? No, I saw your. I saw your microphone go on and off. Yeah, I think so. But I think according to the Gemara as it stands here, you're right. I mean, it's what petach is. I think the idea is that it's easier to. But I take back a little bit what I said before about the blood coming out. But it is, I think, a coherent way of understanding it. But maybe it's also saying more in line with what you were saying, that you're improving the petach, like you were saying, and then you're not really making a petach, and then it may not be bona at all. But they think that you're making a petach. You know, I mean, according to the simple reading of the Bible, of the Bible, and certainly the way, and seems to be the way the Talmud seems to be now, it seems like their experience of the world is that there's always blood, or 9 times out of 10 is blood.
Well, the book that Sarah linked to gets into that. It's good at looking at the development of the relationship to blood versus other signs of virginity.
Right. Okay. I mean,
Right. I mean, it basically his thesis in that book is that while Tanakh thinks that like blood is an indicator of virginity and it's reliable, that like Chazal and also contemporaneous or slightly later Christian sources all think that like that their experience is that it's unreliable, and then they're trying to figure out like what to do about that in different ways.
Right, but why doesn't the Talmud anywhere along here say, who says it's going to be blood? Why doesn't the Talmud just say, maybe there won't be a chabura, maybe there won't be any blood at all? They're saying there's for sure. It seems like the Talmud is saying there's for sure blood.
Well, no, that's what
you
the
just
Isn't that
don't
what
know
it's
if
saying in
it's
the
coming out.
Bavliim?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what the Bekim Bahataya is about. It's saying they won't necessarily bleed.
But that's only for Baki'im, right?
But I think even the idea of describing it as like chabura as opposed to saying that it's like a blood that's just waiting there to be like released already suggests that there's some kind of unreliability to it.
Well, they're both explanations of where the blood is coming from. They're both assuming that there's blood.
but in one of them there's like blood that's waiting there and it's always going to be there, and the other one, like, I don't know, you can make different kinds of wounds and some of them bleed more than others, like, right, or different kinds of injuries and some of them bleed more than others. That
Right, if
seems
it's
like
if it's
already
that-
accepting some kind of like,
Are you saying
if
that
you
the
have this
chabur?
one storehouse of blood that is released upon first sex, then that would be like, you know, that's it. That little pool of blood like pops out when you have sex the first time, and that would be it. Whereas if it's the chabura, then both that, like, which it is, like, that both opens the possibility of somebody not getting chabura depending on how it's done, which is like the hataya, and the fact that like you can continue to get a chabura after, like that, like somebody could bleed not as a virgin, and a virgin cannot bleed.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you that there's definitely in other words, if it's the hataya goes with the idea that it's, well, it could go with either idea, but it certainly goes with the idea that it's a chabura, and there could be cases where there wouldn't be blood according to the Talmud, but the original question, is it a chabura or that, seems to. I'm still asking my question. Why didn't the Gemara just say, who says there'll be blood in the first place? Why did the Gemara say, is it a chabura or is it blood that's kind of, why was that the angle? In other words, that was
Because
the
it
angle in
doesn't-
which they chose to try to permit it. But they could have
I
chosen
think
another.
because they don't want to like totally toss like Dvarim out the window. Like, in other words, I think it's hard, like, given that the biblical sources are so sort of like, you know, if you don't find Bitulim, then there's a real problem. So I think it's
Right,
not
well,
so
the
easy
Gemara
to
is
just be
all
like, well,
talking about
sometimes
this.
this doesn't happen.
Right, you're marrying a virgin on a Wednesday so that you could take it to Beis Din on Thursday if you doesn't find
Right,
blood.
like, at least, right, and if you're, even if that's like not what's happening all the time, like, we're talking that way, like, I don't think it's so easy to just sort of throw that off. And that's why they have to be a little like kind of not
Right.
so
In other words,
straightforward
so that's
about
what
it,
I was
because it's
saying
hard
before.
to just say
That's why I
the
said
Torah
before,
is
but
wrong.
I'm reacting to the book you're referring to, because that's what I was saying before, that it seems to me from the Talmud there's like from the Talmud that we're seeing here now. I don't know every other place, but it seems like they're saying, even though there's a possibility of the people doing hataya, if they're experts, the general assumption is that there's going to be blood, no matter what. There's always going to be blood, and we're just and like the Torah says. And
yeah, but like unlike the Torah, the Gemara is suggesting that there's like all these different ways in which it could not happen, right?
just one. No, just one.
Well, no, but isn't again, they're saying that like probably like a lot of the times there is blood, which remains true. Again, that like most of the time when people are having sex the first time, if they're not doing it with proper lubrication, etc., various other factors, like there will be blood. And they're also acknowledging that that's not inevitable.
Yes, they're definitely acknowledging it's not inevitable. But their starting point wasn't that. Their starting point was kind of that it is inevitable. Like they came to that point about the hatayah. You're right. Anyway, I think we thrashed that out. So did we finish D?
We're almost done. Harehu kabinyan.
So we said it's a mitzvah. Did we get to that part? Mikalkelu etzel hapetach v'gam mitzvah hi. Oh, or you read from, you know where you work, so you read.
Right. We said 3 lines from them. Ve'in sham yisur ela dos hapetach v'harehu kabinyan. The kaven ena mikaven lepetach ela ledam tzarich lepetach mimila ka'ate v'mekalkel etzel hapetach v'gam mitzvah hi. Shari, afilu lechachila, livo be'ila gemura, below hataya, zohi dat kol haposkim, upashutu.
Okay, so basically this last part that I in bold here is he's basically saying that don't be worried by the fact that you have to do hataya. That was only according to that opinion that it's a chabura, but we hold it's not a chabura, it's just releasing blood. And if you're worried about making a petach, well, that's a kilkul, and therefore it's permitted. Are we gonna see? I signed the drisha. Probably we won't. I don't know if we'll look at it, but the drisha. Does anyone look at the drisha? What was the drisha? Gave 2 reasons why. I quoted, I believe, Tosfot, Rabbeinu Tam and Ri. Why it's a kilkul by the woman. Somebody want to remind us of that?
One of them, I mean, the main one I remember was him saying that it would be cool because the man prefers to have sex with virgins.
That's okay. We'll have to say. I don't think he said that. I don't.
No,
think
he
said
did. He said that he says prefers like betula to beula, right? That presumably this idea of it's like somehow more pleasurable, like a.
I don't think he used the word
opening.
pleasurable or prefer.
Okay, he used prefer, but as in like that's presumably what's underlying the prefer is my assumption. But he does end up saying that the reason to be mekalkel would be this idea that the man would prefer the physical experience of having sex with betula.
We'll look at it. So we'll look at it for a second. What was the other reason? The other reason he brought is that the blood. He's trying to get rid of the blood because it's lichluch. Calls it lichluch. In other words, he. I'm sorry. That would be why it's that. Maybe I'm confusing something. We'll have to look at it. Let's look at it. He also talks about lichluch, which is that's actually an improvement. But sorry, so we'll see that. We'll see that inside. I guess we'll have to see inside because I don't remember it perfectly either. All right. So now he presents a problem. Asher, you want to read this? E.
Hold on. אלא שבאגודה, רבי אלעזר הכהן מה-14 כתב, בהלכתה מותר לבעול לכתחילה בשבת, ובלבד שיכוון לבעול בהטיה עד כאן לשונו.
So what does the Aguda say?
So he's saying that it's permitted to מלכתחילה לבעול on Shabbat. Particularly if the plan is to do it the hataya with this expert Babylonian method. וכתב כך על פי דברי התוספות, וכן כתוב בהגעת השירי וז"ל, ולוי מעשש דליל,
וזה לשונו.
וזה לשונו, sorry, לוי מעשש דליל מסיק טעמה משום רוב בקיאים בהטיה, אם כן השתא דאין בקיאים אסור. I just lost my place. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, and he wrote that according to the Tosfot.
This is the Ashiri. This is the Hagot Ashiri.
Sorry. And this is what the Hagot Ashiri said. I guess Levi Maases is like I'm shocked, or I just
Well,
not really shocked, but no,
Maases. I think I'm delaying myself. I'm in doubt.
Okay.
Maases is to mean usually. I think
right.
Means to like to be in a quandary, to be sitting on the fence.
Like I'm hesitant.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so but when he says libi mehases, so okay. Anyway,
my heart is hesitant.
Is hesitant of what was written that the above concludes that Rova Biki that most of the people who are experts in hataya,
and that's the reason for the heter.
And that the reason for the heter is that most people are Biki hataya, which actually doesn't make sense if we're talking about, you know, virgins, first timers, and how could they be experts? Im ken hashta the imbikin asur, and im ken, and in that case, if they're not bikin, then it would be asur.
Well, im hashta. Nowadays,
okay.
Nowadays, we're not experts.
That we're not experts, so it should be asur.
The whole heter of the Gemara falls by the wayside.
This goes into what we were actually talking about earlier. It's like, well, their knowledge was different than ours, so now we have to change what they're ruling because our reality is different.
Maybe so. He says, I'm worried. I think maybe it should be usher because the reason was because of this expertise that we don't have anymore.
Right. וכולי. עיין שם, בכל זה על פי סוגיית הגמרא, למעט כאמר, מעיקרא דדם חברי מחבר, וליטא למסקנה, אלא סירלי דם מפקיד פקיד ומקלקל הוא אצל הפתח כדפרשנו. So he's saying basically what we know now is that it is a mekalkel.
He says this is al pi sugya the Gemara l'mayda ka'amar meikara. He basically saying like this: the Ashiri and the Aguda are making a mistake. They're paskening according to the beginning, the initial part of the Gemara, which was only going according to the idea of chabure mechaber, that they were worried that maybe you're making a wound. Veleta, but it's not true. Leita la maskana. That's not the maskana of the Gemara. What is the maskana? Like he told you, that it's tam nifka pakid. Mafkid pakid. And it's a makalkel. So there's no reason. So you don't need to be an expert anymore. You just need to make sure that we're paskening that the blood is not a wound. So therefore it's mutter as long as it's mekalkel. And it is mekalkel. Here, Yavni, why do you read F?
שוב, ראיתי בכתב שכתב הרב מורנו הרב רבי ישעיה סגל הורוביץ' מירושלים.
Kadosh, right? I put that in just so you know what we're talking about.
שלה הקדוש, מירושלים.
תתכונן ותתכונן במהרה וימינו.
נייס. להחזיק הפסק של האגודה והגאות השירי, על פי דברי התוספות דלעיל, בסוגיה מקמי דמסקינן בסתם דהלכה מותר לבעול בתחילה בשבת, ולא נהרה דפשיטה דאין לשמוע לאגודה והגות השירי בדוכתא דכל חכמי ישראל פליגי עליו, והדברים מבוארים דשגגה יצא מלפני השליטים האלה, ומדינה שרי ליבול בעילה גמורה אף לאותן שאינן בקיאים בהטיה. וכך כתב מהרוך, בעל הספר מאירות עיניים. That's the דרישה, right? the פרישה נרישה?
Yeah, yes.
באבן עזר סימן סמך ג' ועיין במה שכתבתי בקונטרסט מה שכתוב בקונטרסט אחרון לשם בקצרה. לשם בקצרה. Is the קונטרסט אחרון is like something that the Bach added later?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, what are we saying here? He says he sees that the Ashiri.
There are a couple of people who say that who want to paskin lechumra on this, but by the Bach's opinion, that doesn't make sense because everyone except for these few opinions holds like that last line of the Gemara in its simplest form, not.
And what's their mistake?
And their mistake is as you described it. Presumably, he doesn't spell that out, but presumably
right. I think that's what he means, though. No, their mistake is that they thought that the Gemara is that final thing about it being usher for the. Remember, the Bavlim are not good are not experts, but the people who are experts would be allowed and nobody else, and that's not the maskan of the Gemara. So he basically throws out the aguda. And who are the people? He says, Bedukta, in a place, the Kol Chachmei Yisrael, Pligi Alayu. Everybody argues on that. Who are those people? Who is everybody? First most is the Rambam and the Tur. Yeah, we have a bunch. I think the Rosh also. We have all the major weights. So that's going to be the din. Here, read Gimel.
Me. Achen במלכותנו נתפשט המנהג דאין בועלין בתחילה בשבת, ואומר אני בזה דברים המותרים ואחרים נוהגים בו איסור, אי אתה רשאי להתיר בפניהם ואין להורות לבטל המנהג. And after all that, but the common practice is not to, and so don't do it.
Wait. Let's be more precise than just don't do it.
Okay.
He says, Achein, he says in our country, it has spread out the custom to not have relations on Shabbat the first time. And I say, Bezeh, so this is a quote now, I should have put it in quotations. This is a quote from the Gemara, Devarim hamutarim va'acherim noagim bo iser, iyata rashai lahatir b'fneihem. That's a Gemara. So he's saying, a thing that, here, let me put quotes there. Oh, I'm in view mode. Things that are mutter, but people are saying it's aser, don't tell them otherwise. In other words, let them carry on in their blissful ignorance and think that it's aser. Don't go against this minhag. Don't try to uproot the minhag. But in a place where that's not the minhag, then b'vakasha, it's mutter. You're just saying in a place where that's the minhag, don't uproot the minhag. Now, in there are haEzerot in the printed modern printed tour, where this in Siman Reish Pei in Orach Chaim, where this Bach is. So there's a haEzerot on the bottom that the editor added, and he writes there. I didn't give it to you, but he writes there that the Marshal disagrees with this actually, and says no. In this case, you could tell them it's permitted. Now, there's a klal in the Gemara that you don't tell people something is permitted even though if their custom is to be strict about it. But the Marshal says even in this case you could tell them. So he disagrees with the Bach on this last point, which is interesting. And it's a big
Yes.
chiddush what he's saying. Because then you have to get to the question: when do we say that rule? When do we not say that rule?
Is that Klav the reason?
Marshal's notes, he really seems to want to have as much, first of all, transparency as possible. And he also wants to pass it from the Shulchan Aruch as much as possible. So, it moves the direction back from the other, from what was stated earlier.
In other words, he wants to follow the Shulchan Aruch, so he'll go against
He
the
doesn't
Bach.
want people,
Oh, so you want to right?
he wants people passing it from the Gemara.
So let's take a few minutes break. Let's come back at quarter after. Let me pause the recording. Okay, so just to be clarify everything, what I remember, what Lexi was right. What it says is in the Drisha, we're not going to look at it, but in the Drisha it says, Rashi says Mikalkel who it's a Mikalkel by the Betula because a Betula is adifa me Beula. He just says like that a Betula is better than a Beula. I mean, you could understand it simply that she gets more money. She's a higher valued object when creating a ketubah. But whatever, he just says adi.
But I thought we were talking about this is happening once the couple is married anyway. So it's kind of this very inverted logic that by
Yes,
doing what you're supposed to do with the woman, you make her less valuable for somebody who wants to do what you're doing with her when you've already.
Yeah, yes, that's exactly right.
It's very convoluted.
But the two things that I was thinking of was a different thing, was that it says, he talks about whether you want to make a chabura or whether you just are trying to get the blood. And it's a very strange idea that you're not trying to make a chabura, you're trying to get the blood. What does it mean, get the blood? And on that, Tosfos gives two different answers. And one is the Ri, who says that you want to see the blood to know if she's a virgin or not. That's why you want the blood. And the other one is the Rabbeinu Tam, who says you want to remove the blood so that next time you won't have to deal with all this blood. So that's the idea that's sort of a side point. But the main point of the Drisha is that he basically says exactly the same thing the Bach says in his earlier. So he says the same thing in his own way, basically the same idea that we are paskening that its dam is mifkad paki, or is paki. I keep saying it wrong. Yeah, he writes mifkad paki. The Bach said it paki. He said it a little bit different. Whatever. The dam is mifkad paki, and that's the way we paskin, and therefore you don't need to be an expert. You don't need to do a hataya. Let's take a look at the tour. Actually, let's skip. Let's go straight to the Shulchan Aruch, because the Shulchan Aruch is basically the same as the tour. So Shulchan Aruch Samach Gimel Halacha Aleph. Aaron, you want to read?
Yep. Mutar liv ol betula b'Shabbat. Avodat betula kevan sheba'al bilat mitzvah poresh miyad. Afilu hiktana shelo higia zmana lirot v'lo rata. It is permissible to have sex with a virgin on Shabbat. One who has sex with a virgin, since they have done Be'ilat Mitzvah, they
once.
Or
translate kevan as once instead of since.
Since it was Be'ilat Mitzvah.
No, not since. Translates kevan as once.
As once.
Once he has done.
Right. Let me just. Kevan sometimes means since and sometimes means once, which means every time you see kevan, you have to plug in the two and see which one works.
The reason I said since was we were looking, I forget which commentary on the tour was talking about cases in which it's not milat mitzvah, which in
Yes.
their view are not poresh miyad. I think this was in the Bach.
Yeah, we're going to see it also in the commentaries here. But
Okay.
yeah, but I don't think I still would translate it as once.
Okay. Once he has done bilat mitzvah, he is poresh miyad. Even if the woman, even if this is a young girl who has not reached the age of puberty, and did not see any blood. Umihu.
Those are two different. Those are right. Those are if you look at that Mishnah in Nida, talks about these. There's different statuses. Like if you're not at, she's not at the age where she would see, and there's another thing that she didn't see, because it's possible that you see even though you're not at the age that you would see, but you saw. Then that's also a different status. But here she's neither. She's neither at the age nor Katana, and she's not the age, and she also didn't see. You would still be porish. Why? You might think, what do you mean? It's obvious. It says the Mishnah actually in Nida that you don't have to be that it's not really blood. It's a blood from a wound. It's not Nida blood. So why would you be porish? But we don't paskin like the Mishnah.
It says in Siman Katsag that the reason is Shemarata Tipat Dam Kechardal.
Right.
In this particular case.
So that's like a rabbinic idea, whatever. We're not passing. But basically, the simple shot of the Mishnah is that you don't even wait. You don't even have to. It's not Nida because she didn't see and she didn't. And we can tole it on the fact that she had that it was on the Makkah. But here we're saying no, we don't pass like
that. Umihu otab ila gomer kederko be'ever chai. In any event, he finishes that act of sex as is customary with an erect penis.
Right, which is not the case. Which is not the case when it's dam nida. In other words, if it's dam nida vadai, in other words, if she's a woman that's not a virgin, and you see blood, or she feels, actually, you don't see blood. The woman says, I felt that I just got my period now. So the man is actually not allowed to withdraw until his penis is no longer erect, because otherwise he's deriving pleasure from her while she is in nida. That's why he says, be'ever chai, that does not apply to a virgin, because in that case we do say, oh, it's a makkah. The dam is really dam makkah and not dam nida. But we're not learning Hilchot Nida right now. But that's the background.
Nachum.
Yes.
So just the hotzah of the aver is creates pleasure in that situation.
Right.
So we let it die. We don't move.
Exactly.
One does not move until it dies. Dies is quotation marks.
Right. So that only applies in a case of nida, but not in a place of dam tulin. So if you look at the Beit Shmuel bet. So he's going on poresh miyad. Why does he have to poresh miyad once he finish? In other words, basically what it's saying is you do the act in a normal way, you finish, but then you don't hang around. And why does he say that? So that's, you can look in the Beit Shmuel bet. Aaron, you can read.
I'm just, I had copied and pasted the Shulchan Aruch. I'm just going to Al HaTorah.
I've got it.
Okay. Beit Shmuel bet, Poresh Miyad. Mishum dechayshinan shemarat hadam Alfalgav the Talenanda Bemuka, Kmoshikatu Bishas, Bemake, Kmoshikatu Bishas.
But others, we're sort of like walking this tightrope here because we're worried that maybe she did see blood of Nida, even though we're assuming that it's the blood of the dam. Now, I just got through telling you we're assuming it's blood of the dam, and that's why you can remove the haEzer where it's still erect. But we're also worried that maybe it is dam Nida.
I
And
think
that's why you should believe.
we're worried that not that this is right, that there could also be dam.
That exactly, that there could also be dam. Continue.
Over Yoredea Siman Kabaz, Ve'en Lacha Make Gdola Miza. Tiret Harashba, Had Talenam Bemake, Hainu Kadesh Lo Te'asor al Ba'ala, Im Nimsa Shlosha Pamim Dam Achar Kol Bia Ubia. So the context in which we are saying that this is blood that is not Nida blood,
By a virgin. By a
right.
virgin, what is the difference? Why do we say, what is the nafkamina that we're saying that it's the blood is, if we're saying it's to leave miyad, then what's it, why is we calling it dam, in what sense is it dam metulin and not dam nida? So the Rashba says, what does it say?
The context in which we're saying that it is dam betulim is lest it count towards these three the three times one might have sex while blood while having sex, at which point they might no longer be allowed to have sex. So we are ruling this out as one of those three times by saying it's dam betulim.
In other words, if a man has relations with his wife and 3 times in a row he sees blood, then he is supposed to assume that every time he has relations with this woman, he's going to have blood, and then he's forbidden to be with this woman anymore.
So in that context,
and in that case, we're going to say, well, but this is really blood of betulin, so it doesn't count for that.
Right, but not in the context of being porish miyad. Of alot halenam b'makeh b'chi hagavna. V'harosh tiretz bia la kol.
No. A little bit different what you said. Of alot halenam b'makeh b'chi hagavna. In other words, he would hold you still have to let the penis become unerect before withdrawing in the case of a virgin. Now, only for this case do we say that the blood is virginal blood, but not in the other din at the Shulchan Aruch Paskin.
Right, that the only context in which we're saying it's virginal blood is so that it doesn't count for these three.
Right.
But otherwise you would operate the same as if you saw dam or suspected dam nida.
All right, that's enough of that. Let's go to look at Dalit in the wait. Right. Look at Gimel. Gimel in the Chelkat Machokek.
Still me?
Yeah.
Gomer Kaderko. La fuke mida haravad. Shekatav mamtin ad shiamut. I am biyoredeh b'yosef. So this is when it says Gomer Kaderko, it is in order to rule against the position of the Ravad, who says you have to wait until the penis becomes flaccid.
Right. In Dalit?
V'afilu badka v'lo matzah dam tme'ah.
Oh, so wait, I don't know if we read that. Let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch. So we said like this. We said, Gomer kedarko be'ever chai, va'afilu badka v'lo matzah dam tame'ah. She is tamei. Shema rata tipat dam kecharda. V'chafahu, or chafhu shichvat zera. In other words, maybe she saw also dam nida, and I think it means that sperm, semen covered it, so she didn't, so it disappeared, but she saw a tiny bit. But tzricha shetifsok b'tahara, b'tivdok kol shiva. So basically, what we're saying is, after the first marital relations, they finish, and then she has to count. She has to tivdok, call shiva. She has to check for 7 days, and then she goes on. V'lo tatchil livdok ad yom chamishi l'shimusha. She has to wait 5 days from the bia. That's like the minimum time of nida. So she's got 5 days and then 7 days of 5 days of waiting and 7 days of checking. Kishar isha shamsha v'achar kach ra'ata. So she's got to wait these 12 days. Here, so look at Daled in Chelkat Mechokek.
I apologize for the allergies. Vafil bad kavalo matz adam tmea. V'davka shegamar b'yato. אבל אם לא עסק רק הערה, ופירש ולא ראתה אדם, יש מקילים כמבואר ביורדי סימן קצר. So this is specifically when they've completed having sex, but if they only did some early stage of arousal or partial sex, and then the man separated from the woman, and then they didn't see blood, some would say that they don't have to, that you could do whatever.
Hara, I think, means that the penis touches the vagina, but doesn't enter it. I think that's what it means.
Well, didn't we have that come up in a previous thing? There was like dispute as to what constituted hara, whether it was like the initial contact or whether it was like the most of the
Right.
corona entering.
Just the corona, yeah. I remember, yeah. Yeah, okay. So it could be similar events. Okay. And look at hay.
Below tatchil limnot ad yom chamishi. V'chenu biyordeh.
So wait, what's this change here? V'lo tatchil livdok ad yom. You see, that's a mistake. In the Shulchan Aruch, it says, Lo tatchil livdok ad yom chamishi. He says, Lo tatchil limnot ad yom chamishi. In other words, you check actually those 5 days to make sure you don't keep seeing blood, but you don't, I don't know, he says you shouldn't count until the...
Well, I think it ends up being a similar thing, Lamaisa, right? Because the idea is like counting seemingly Sheva Nikim, right? So it's like you can't start counting them until after 5 days because you can't start checking until after 5 days.
Yeah, so what's this? So why is he correcting this?
I don't know if he's
think-
correcting. Maybe that's...
I think you could, if you say that you don't start checking, you could say, you might be confused and say, oh, you can start checking. You can start counting those days and you don't actually have to check. You still only need 7 days total, you could say. And that's what he's correcting. Lest you say that.
I guess the point is, there's no need to check. You're saying like that? There's no need to check the first 5 days. Because anyway, you're going to assume there's blood there. So,
Right.
Okay. Let's go on. Ella, then he spells it out. Ella shenida, I'm back in the Shulchan Aruch. Ella shenida gemura asur lo lishon al mitata afilu b'she'ena b'mita. If she would be a real nida, then he wouldn't be able to lie on her bed even when she's not around. But the v'hakala muter lo lishan ba'oto mita la'achar sha'amda metzlo. But it's another difference between nida and the virgin woman, that he could lie on her bed when she's not there. Vafilu b'sadin she'adam alav, even on the sheet in which the blood is there, he could lie on that, which is different from a nida. All right, let's wait. Does somebody not read? I want to go to bet. Bet is a whole nother topic. And here, Alan, maybe you want to read bet?
Sure. All right. V'yesh omrim shachar shematza betulim mevarech v'yeruch ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher tzag egos began Eden chule. V'yesh omrim de'im mevarchin ata plokos.
So this is saying, this is going to be a Shulchan Aruch that is kind of, we don't really paskin really, but he says, there are those that say, well, he says Yesh Omrim. There are those that say that if you found Betulim, you say a bracha and you say Baruch Ata Hashem, and as you say Shem Umalchut, and then you say this bracha, which is not written here. And then the Rama adds, and there are those that say you should say it with a kos. So, well, let's first look at the two commentaries here, and then we'll go to the sources that I gave. So look here, when I read the Zion in the Helkat Macholkek.
Shachar shematza betulim mevarech v'lo shaykh kan over l'siyato demanayada t'shamre chok betara. Okay, so that's the idea of over l'siyatan doesn't apply here. Who knows if they've actually done it in purity?
Right, in other words, if she's a virgin, we don't know if she's a virgin, so you couldn't say it before. You have to say it after. This is a bracha that you say on having relations. A man says on having relations with a virgin, but he doesn't know if she's a virgin, so he has to say it after. Umar Shal.
Umar Shal kadav d'lo nehige levarech brachazo.
Oh, so the Marashal says we don't say this bracha, right? We just So here's the Marashal going against the Shulchan Aruch. We go ahead.
וגם הריף והרמב"ם לא הזכירו ברכה זו. שמע אמינא דלהסביר להו כגבנה לברך ברכה זו.
Hilchot Gedolot.
כהלכות גדולות, right, well, yeah.
Levarech bracha zo. So he says the reason we don't say it is because this is a bracha that's not in the Talmud, and we don't invent new brachot. Okay, so that's basically saying not to say it. Look at the Beit Shmuel, Daled.
Right, the Beit Shmuel. ויש אומרים אחר שמצא בתולים מברך, עיין בדרישה ובך, בקוף א'.
Not sure what the Kuf Hey Aleph is. Kuntras Acharon, but Kuntras Acharon.
Nice.
Kuntras Acharon.
מה שהקשו על זה.
That's actually I brought this Kuntras Acharon in my sources. Yeah, I'm back with Kuntras Acharon.
מה שהקשו על זה מדברי הראש, ריש קדושין, שכתב שם, דאין מברכים שום ברכה, מה שלא מצינו בש"ס.
We don't say any brachas that are not in the Talmud.
Yeah, what we just said. Maharsha katav de'im mevrichim bracha zo, ubach katav de'yesh levarech below shem u'malchut.
Right. So we got basically three opinions. Don't say it. Say it with Shem Malchus, and say it. Don't say it. Say it with Shem Malchus, and say it without Shem Malchus. Okay. So here, let's go back to my source sheet here. Here, Yavni, you want to read this Sheish, number 6 here?
Can I ask if it's notable that the Shulchan Aruch doesn't actually give the bracha here?
Yeah, it is kind of weird. Like, where does he expect you to know the bracha from?
Right.
Well, he does do that. There's sometimes I've seen things like that where it's a bracha that everybody knows. Like,
right,
you know,
but this is it?
Not,
yeah, exactly.
This is a bracha that not even everybody agrees you should say. So it does seem weird. The Torah, I think, brings the whole bracha.
The Torah brings it, and also I forget who it is, but they note that like he changes it. The Rosh doesn't have Shem Malkut, and the Torah adds Shem Malkut into it.
Right, and then some people say it's like a mistake. to add Shem Malchus. Well, we'll see this. So in the time we have here, let's go.
Where did you want me to read, the Rosh or the
Six.
Bach?
Let's go in order. Yeah.
ראש, אוקיי. ברכת בתולים כתב בעל הלכות, ברוך אשר צג אגוז בגן עדן שושנת העמקים, בא למשול זר במעיין חתום, על כן עילת אהבים זרע הקודש שמרה בטהרה, חוק לא הפרה, ברוך הבוחר בזרעו של אברהם. ואפשר שברכה זו תקנו הגאונים ז"ל, ומסתבר לברכה אחר שמצא בתולים.
Right. So the Rosh is bringing from the Hilchot Gedolot, and he's saying it's probably from the Gaonim, because it's not in the Talmud. And it's after you found Betulin. And he brings here the whole bracha. That's the Rosh. Okay. Let's look at here's the Kudras Achron on our Siman. This is the Bach. Sorry. So read that, Yavni. Sorry, I'm moving around too much.
Yep.
There.
כתב בהג ברכת בתולים וכולי, כך כתב הראש, right, so that's quoting the tool, כך כתב הראש בשמו פרק כמה דכתובות, וכתב עליו, ואפשר שברכה זו תקנו הגאונים וכולי, עד כאן לשונו. ואף על גב שהראש, פרק כמה דקידושין, השיג וכתב הברכה דתקנו הגאונים בפדיון בכור, דאין כוח להוסיף ברכה אחר חתימת התלמוד, כמו שכתב רבינו ביורי דעה, סימן ש"ה.
Right, so we can't just make up brachot. Whatever
right.
brachot there are in the Talmud, those are the brachot. There's actually...
Even the Gaonim.
What?
Even the Gaonim couldn't.
Even the Gaonim cannot make up brachot. Brachot are determined by the Talmud, and that's all. There's one bracha in the morning that we say that's also not in the Talmud.
Right. I think is it Zokef Kufim, I think? Right.
I don't remember now, actually. I don't remember which one.
Wasn't one of the brachot of Shmona Esrei also added much later than the Talmud? The L'mal Shanim, Ati Tikva?
I'm not sure when that was added. Yeah, but is it much later than the Talmud?
I'm
Or
pretty
it's in
sure.
the Talmud. All right.
I think it's late. I think it's later, but I could be wrong.
I don't know. Anyway, that's one exception. I forget there's an explanation for that one in the morning brachot. But all right, go on.
Go on in that. Okay. יש לומר לשם דווקא, הברכה היא בשם ומלכות. זה ודאי אסור. אבל הך ברכה דבתולים דלית בשם ומלכות, שרי לברכה, על פי תקנת הגאונים, דאינו אלא שבח ותהילה לפניו, על שבחר בזרעו של אברהם.
So wait a second. So he says, yes, he did argue against saying this bracha on Pidyon Haben. But that was because it was with Shem Malchut. But this bracha that we say on a virgin is without Shem Malchut. So
does that mean it's without? Does that mean it's just literally as written Baruch without Baruch Atah Hashem, or does that mean without Elokeinu Melech Haolam?
I think it means Baruch Melech Haolam Malchut. I think it means Baruch, like we say. I think this means Baruch Hatzag Egoz, like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Just Baruch, because you can say that. That's grammatically correct. Baruch, like he wrote, like the Rosh wrote above in 6. Baruch Asher Tzag Egoz. In other words, blessed is the one who, I don't know what Tzag Egoz. Well, we'll see what the Prisha says. Yeah. Go ahead.
מיהו אין יישוב זה מספיק, you have a thing covering. מי הוא אין יישוב זה מספיק, אלא להרוש, מי הוא אין יישוב זה מספיק, אלא להרוש גופי, שהביא ברכה זו בלא שם המלכות. אבל רבינו, הטור, הביאה בדאית בשם המלכות, קשיא.
Right, brought it with Shem Malchut, so we don't have a good answer.
Yeah.
V'tzarich lomar,
טעות סופרים הוא, וצריך לומר בלא שם המלכות.
so he says that the tour is a ta'ut. The tour is a ta'ut, it's without Shem Malchut. Always that is the, how to say, the last recourse to say it's a ta'ut sofrim. But here he's saying it's a ta'ut sofrim. In other words, he's saying for sure you don't say it with Shem Malchut. Okay.
But how is it in the Ilchot Gdorot?
Good question. I didn't look. I assume without Shem Malchut. I assume it must be without Shem Malchut. And that's why he's saying that it's an innovation of the tour, which he couldn't be making because he not allowed to make that innovation. So it must be a ta'ut. Okay, so let's look at the Prisha, because we have this interesting bracha that well, we already saw that basically we don't say this bracha. I brought here in 9, the Bach brings Umarsha, at the end I wrote Marshal Katav de Lona Agin Levarech Brachazo. So we don't say this bracha, but let's spend a few minutes that we have left. The Prisha explains the bracha. Lexi, you want to read?
Sure. Asher tag egoz began Eden, Eli Yisrael shnimshalu le'egoz dichtiv al ginat egoz iradati, Meramez nami abatulim shel benot Yisrael, Dema egoz yesh bo klipot zo al zo, k'da'aminan b'midrash, kach benot Yisrael, shemishamrin klipot v'tulehen, v'chen masik bal yimshol zar b'mayan chatum. Right, so who like poured water on this egg and not this egg, this nut in Gan Eden, and this is like Bnei Yisrael who are compared to nuts in Shir Hashirim.
Are you saying Jewish people are nuts?
That fits.
Who are compared to nuts in Shir Hashirim, and it's also hinting at virgins of Bnei Yisrael who are like nuts. They have shells over their virginity. And they guard them.
I mean, it's first of all, it's interesting that we don't say this bracha. I guess people are uncomfortable with this bracha.
Yeah, I can't say I particularly like it.
I think and probably people were uncomfortable with this bracha 500 years ago, or more. Even in the times of the Talmud, they didn't have this bracha. There's just a certain period the Gaoni brought this bracha, and then it quickly dissipated.
Yeah.
Do
you want me to keep reading?
Yeah. Well, let's just understand it.
All right. So Shoshana Tamakim, the rose or lily of the valley. Yisrael nimshalu l'Shoshana dichtiv k'Shoshana ben achuchim. ומרמז נמי על הפתולים כדכתיב סוגה בשושנים שהוא גדר קל ואין פורץ בו לכנוס, הרי חתן נכנס לחופה וליבו מגעגע לחיבת חיתוניו, בא לזקק לה, אמרה לו טיפת דם כחרדל ראיתי, הרי פורש מיד, הרי סוגה כשושנים, כן פירש רש"י בשיר השירים. So the Jewish people are also compared to lilies, roses, whatever you want to translate it as.
What is that comparison? The Shoshana Ben Achuchim, it means that we are like surrounded by our enemies. Is that the idea? That the Chuchim are thorns, like we're the nations of the world that are attacking us. Are they like Chuchim? They're like thorns. By the way, I'll tell you my chiddush on this pasuk, Shoshana Ben Achuchim. The normal explanation is that it's talking about a rose. And in fact, Shoshana is sometimes the word for a rose in Hebrew, even though Vered is also a rose. They say Shoshana but like you said, but Lexi, you translated more correctly as a lily. But why do they translate it as a rose? Because Shoshana ben Chuchim is like the big flower. They translate the Shoshana as like the flower of the rose, which is between the thorns of the rose. But but actually that's not the right shot. The right shot is if you ever go on a tiyul in Eretz Israel and you look for tulips, which grow wild here, they grow a lot of times inside of a what is it? It's a kind of choch, sirah kotzani. There's a plant called a sirah kotzani. They grow, a lot of times you'll see a tulip, big red flower, and around it is this thorny bush. Because that's going to protect them from the goats. The goats won't eat the thorny bush, and that protects the tulip. So I think that Shoshana ben Chuchim actually is a tulip that grows in a thorny bush. And that makes more sense because it's not a vered, it's a Shoshana. So I think that's my Perush. You can use that on your next tiyul.
Okay. Well, in any case, these lilies or roses, however you want to translate it, probably
Tulips.
lilies. We're compared to them in Shir Shirim, and also in Shir Shirim, we get a reference to how this could be about virgins, because it talks about like her belly, and then it talks about it being like infenced by or like hedged by the Shoshanim. That like, you know, a fence of lilies is a geder kal, is not a particularly strong fence. And nonetheless, it isn't like broken through. And this is similar to, you know, a chatan who's super excited to have sex, but if she says, I saw a spot of blood the size of mustard, then he immediately will separate from her. So even though that's seemingly like a small thing, it's an effective barrier. Yeah, that's Rashi's Perush on that pasuk in Shir Shirim. And then the Eilat Havim. Actually, I'm not sure how best to translate Eilat Havim. Has to do with like a star.
Ayelet.
Or no, the
Ayelet.
ayelet. Oh,
Ayelet,
like a doe. Fine, like a beloved or loving like doe. Fine. So Yisrael Nimshalu, the ayelet, ahavim, Meremez. I guess it doesn't. I think it's in Tehillim. I think we're not in Shir Shirim anymore, but whatever. Yisrael is compared to this doe, Meremez Nami, ala betulim, Dema ayala, rachamat zar, u betulin, chozrin, kol pa'am, ulolam, ena belo betulim, kach b'nei Yisrael, she mishamrim betulehen, ulolam, ena belo betulim, ad shetinaseh. Okay, so it's also similar to virgins, because just as with a doe, her womb is narrow, and her like, I'm assuming here they're referring to like her hymen returns.
Yes, her hymen.
I guess her hymen regenerates. Not sure why they know that about a doe, but apparently that's true.
I don't want to know why they know that.
And so she never doesn't have her hymen. So too, Ben Israel never don't have their hymen until they don't, because then they've gotten married and then they don't have their betulim.
Right. So, okay. So this is this bracha, which has a kind of high expectation of the Jewish people, or a high praise of the Jewish people. I think this last Bach is not anything new. Just looking at it.
Rav Nachum, this may be she did, but we were talking earlier about why we don't. One of the reasons we don't say it, and I imagine that probably no one who was involved in the writing of this bracha would ever be in a position in which they had to actually say the bracha. Presumably the people writing it are, if they're Geonim and they're probably older, they're probably already married, such that right, they're sort of mapping on, I don't know, we're talking about, right, this sort of like cosmic theurgic powerful theological, at least for them, significance to this act, and they're imagining, whoa, wouldn't it be great if we said a bracha? But they're actually never going to be in a position where they have to say the bracha and sort of experience like, oh, like maybe this is actually not the time, and I want to be saying this sort of cosmic theurgic bracha, which just might sort of explain why like the experience they're imagining is not one that they actually have.
It's a kind of cerebral activity of creating this bracha, which is not kind of divorced from the reality of the event.
Right, but they would never be in a position where they end up saying, "Oh, I tried to say the bracha and actually it didn't work out for me," because like presumably most of the people, like people came with the bracha, are not actually going to be in this position here.
I did sort of wonder whether this was kind of the opposite, like this was a kind of popular practice that sort of worked its way in. And the part of the reason that made me think that was this whole like Shem and Malchut concern, right? So that it's not like a scholarly enterprise to go invent a bracha, because it seems like that's something that like generally they're uncomfortable with. But that this is something that's kind of floating around in the culture, and that they don't quite know what to do with. So
well, it could have been in a certain society. It might have been you can imagine a certain kind of patriarchal society, maybe in Bavel. I can also see what you're saying. Yeah, that it could have arisen culturally, and then later generations thought this is a legitimate bracha. But it could also,
yeah, like I'm not, I think, right, these like popular practices can have gender politics that might be uncomfortable for us, but
at the time, right, well, societies change,
and I think there is some like, whatever, I'm not saying this is the bracha I would write, but it's not crazy to think that there's some bracha connected to sex.
I mean, you could view this bracha as a very couldn't you view this bracha as a very beautiful thing that we're comparing?
Yeah, I mean, you could have you could have written a nicer bracha. That's not what I mean.
It has it has a lot of flowery language.
Shoshana,
but like different
the
themes.
idea of making a bracha after this like really important act is not at all a crazy one. I think the things that are like uncomfortable about this one is that it's like clearly the bracha that like the man is saying about having like had sex with his virgin wife, and the whole thing, at least according to this Perush, is like, again, it's about like virginity, right? That like I could imagine a very like lovely bracha that is like mutually said after a couple's like first act of having sex, that's about some kind of basar echad sort of thing, whatever. That could be really lovely. But I think the act of like the man talking rapturously about how nice his virgin wife was is a little
condescending.
For sure.
It's condescending, and it's also, in a sense, threatening, because it's telling her of the expectations that he has of her, that she is shomer, the nida, like even if it's the size of a mustard seed, it's almost lecturing her on her proper role. So I can see that, but it does have flowery language. I do,
And again, I think it reinforces the high stakes of what happens if there isn't done between. Like that's part of what's going on.
That's also true. What if ever
right, which is also about sort of like keeping her in line in a way that's pretty problematic.
Right.
It also feels like within the context of the idea that like the men most enjoy having sex with the virgin, almost like saying a bracha on like, well, that was the best it'll ever be for me. Like, good job on keeping your virginity. This was like, which also doesn't feel like the greatest kavana to like enter the marriage with.
It also seems like the man the man to the woman here is God to Knesset Israel. So also the man is sort of being mapped onto God in a way that we actually don't usually see in Brachot, and we seem like particularly not good in this particular situation.
Right. I was trying to put myself into the mindset of this, a 15-year-old adolescent man, right? And it feels like this siman for them could be either right, so extremely stressful, right? Parish miad, like this that regulation of a very intense moment in life, and also situating oneself in this grand narrative, which could be beautiful, or also in this particular form very problematic. But I think just demonstrates a lot of different sides and experiences of halacha for the people.
Right,
who
there are different
practice
kinds of
it,
people.
who
There are
practice
very, I
combat.
think you're making an excellent point also. There's some people that are like, want to be very holy and pure, and they feel, and they're in a moment of, a moment that they've never experienced before, that they're don't know what to do with, and this bracha gives them a way to understand that event as a holy event and in a holy way. And I think that the bracha also is probably not said in the woman's presence. It's probably just a bracha that he makes on his own at some later moment. And especially if the Bach that we didn't read brings that there are these opinions that we saw also in the commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, that you say it on a cup. Especially like he doesn't have a cup in the middle of the night there. He'd have to wash his hands, and he'd have to put a yarmulke on, and we're talking about a later event, I think. At least according to I think some people understand it as a later event that he says to sort of put a mental framework on this, a holy framework on this event. I mean, that's ideas I'm thinking of as we're talking. Any other people want? Any other comments? No. Anyway, interesting, little known bracha. Maybe one day it will be used in a totally different context. All right, thank you guys. That was a nice little short siman. Next time we'll do Samech Dalet. Actually, I was thinking of let me just stop this. I have a question to ask you. Stop.